things to happen for us to recognize that. And so if I can share that my journey and the journey of other women that I've met, I do that. It doesn't come easy though, because I come with some stuff, but it doesn't come. Yeah, because it's important.
Why don't you tell us what you did this week?
So, I went back to Bedford Hills Prison. I go there often, as much as I can, with the work that I do. I went back because one of my really good friends, like my best friend, who's the longest serving female, I'll use this word right now, inmate in New York State prisons, is being released Monday. She was 17 years old. She was 17 years old in 1979, and she had a 50 years to life sentence. And she's being released after 39 years Monday. So I went up to bring her clothes. It was not a good day to go up there, but it's all right. It's done, and I'll be there to pick her up Monday.
Yes, you're a great friend. And it just occurred to me that we should probably use the microphones for video and filming for those that couldn't join us today. No worries. So maybe if you want to hold it like here. Testing. That's working. Well, you're a great friend. I'm doing that. So you had a very good friend, speaking of good friends, and a mentor, and much deeper than that actually. You used to call her mother, and you met her at Bedford Hills. And before she passed, you promised her that you were going to get some women out of prison, and I think you've gotten 7 women out. Or
Right, right. We talked about that the other night. I think the total that I don't talk about, because I think people who follow me and what I like, the work that I do, that's something that I don't talk about. I don't feel like it needs to be spoken about, right? It's obvious, like, I don't know if it's so obvious, but it's obvious what I'm doing, why I'm doing what I'm doing. But in the 6 years that I've been out, I've helped with the release of 7 women. 4 of them I've buried. We'll make that, or maybe 8 women now. 4 of them I've buried. And what we don't talk about are the conditions that women face when they're inside. And it's not like the men don't face it, but the health concerns and the health issues for women are different than men, and they're not addressed adequately, if at all. And women, we have come out. I had a stroke 3 years ago. At this time 3 years ago, I almost died. And a lot of the women that I did time with have had strokes, or having strokes. Some just had some just the other day. Have cancer. Some lived through it, the cancer, some did not. But the 4 women that I buried, actually 3 of them that I really physically helped get out had terminal illnesses. And I was able to get them out the back door with some help and get them placed into a nursing home. And I went to visit them and take care of them. I was telling you earlier, I don't have a savings account because I've been doing this. Like, I feel like it's important because what people don't realize is the majority of women that are in prison don't have family. And so no one's there to take care of them. Just like I went today to go visit, the visiting room was empty. But if I would have went to a men's prison, it would have been packed.
Yeah.
Like, it would have been packed. So, yeah. So I helped to bury 4 of them. And one of them was a young girl who finally was able to get released, and I was like a mentor to her. And she was killed by an abusive boyfriend.
Yeah.
So, right. And she was on parole, and he was on parole. And we don't talk about those things. So that's what really, it compels me to talk about it, because we don't talk about this violence issue.
Yeah. And we'll talk more about that as we go. You were born in Jamaica. You're an immigrant like I am. You were born in Jamaica, and then...
Let's hear for immigrants. Like, nobody's saying
so you were born in Jamaica, and then, but you grew up on Boynton Avenue in the Bronx, off the 6th Street.
Elder Ave.
Yeah. I also grew up on the overpass. So how did you get to New York City from Jamaica, and what did your childhood look like before?
How did I get here? So I was this little girl in Jamaica with my mother, with my friends, which were butterflies and dragonflies and birds and flowers and stuff. Those were my friends. And this couple, this man, who he has family on the island. And I guess, he was visiting at one point, and I was introduced to him as a little girl. I was 5.5, 6 years old. Just met him, didn't know anything. And then I met his wife eventually. And then one time when they were together, when they went back to the island, they were having a conversation. They were talking to me about this magical place. And this magical place was Disneyland at the time. Disney World didn't exist, Disneyland. But I didn't know what Disneyland was, but they described to me a very magical place, a very pretty place that I would like to see.
Like it's the most magical place on earth.
Right.
I used to work there for some
right.
time, and they really maintain that. So
I
can understand your excitement.
Yeah, it was really exciting to me. I was like, oh, really? It sounded so pretty, so I wanted to go. And so they said that I would go see it. And my mother said, yeah, you're gonna go with them to go see it. Basically, that's how it happened. So I didn't know that conversation, by the time I got here, I was 7 and a half. Meant that I would never go home again to Jamaica, the only home I knew and the only mother that I knew. But they brought me here under that pretense. I never went to Disneyland. They never took me. Never took me.
So where did you go instead?
I went inside of a closet every day and was raped every day by the man that would become my father. So that was my Disneyland. It was a nightmare.
Thank you for sharing that. You continue to do every day. Can you tell us about your life a few months before going to prison, before your sentence?
So there's a lot of, I know Chanel said that you read my story, books obviously looked me up. There's this narrative that's out there about me that's created, scripted, about me being a kidnapper, torturer, murderer, whatever. And I killed a gay man and all this stuff. That's not true. What's true is a human being died because of a crime that was committed, a kidnapping. But how I got involved and how I became an unwilling accessory, also a victim in a crime, was that I did agree to a kidnapping. I'm sorry, not a kidnapping, a black man. I didn't know Mr. V. His name is Thomas Vigliolo. I didn't know him. I didn't know anything about it. They said they would give me some money if I would witness a black man. And so I said, okay. That's where I went wrong.
Yeah, and you were hanging out with bad friends who...
Well, I didn't have really any friends.
Right.
I didn't have any friends. I was like, by the time I was 19, I did, at age of 12, go to school and tell the school counselor that I was being hurt and I couldn't take it anymore. I was being taken into a closet and I needed someone to help me. And I knew my mother wasn't gonna listen to me. My mother at the time, by that time, had become one of the directors for New York State Mental Health, but she didn't do anything to help me. And so I said, well, let me go to school and tell my counselor, because that's what counselors are supposed to do. And I went, I was 12, and out of that scenario, I became the liar. Like I was lying, and my mother knew what to say, knew the words to say, and she used something that really bothered me. And I didn't know why it bothered me as a child. There was a show on at that time, and I think it was called, at that time, Beyond the Walls. It became later The Prisoner Selma H. And it was about these women in prison. They were isolated. It was just very creepy, just like when they used to watch it, so I watched it. Because I had to watch what they told me to watch. I had to listen on the radio, to the radio, what they told me to listen to. I had to dress how they wanted me to dress. I was made fun of. I was picked on a lot. And then I had some fights where, thankfully, no one bothered me after that. I guess the anger that I had inside came out, to defend myself. So when I told, they didn't believe me or acted like they didn't believe me. But I know now as an adult and as an educated adult that they knew, but nobody wanted to do anything. And my mother knew the words to say because she was the director of mental health in this state, one of them. And so she knew what to say to tell the counselor. And so as a 12-year-old, I was shut down and I was told that I was a liar. And so because no one believed me, I never told again. And I made a series of bad choices. I ran away at 14 because I couldn't take it anymore, and I had received one of the highest scholarships in the boroughs, and I was going to go, I had won a scholarship to one of the most prestigious high schools in the country, but I didn't go because I ran away with a very much older man that said he would help me, and finally someone was listening to me, and as a child, like, okay, somebody's gonna help me, but he became my worst nightmare.
Yeah. You went to prison when you were 17.
No, I had just turned 20.
Okay.
I just turned 20.
Okay. And in your book you say the ages of women going to prison are much younger than when I went to prison. And that resonates with me because of the work that I do at Rikers Island, where I go and I teach incarcerated young girls. They're not adults yet, so they're between the ages of 16 and 20.
Yeah, I was on adolescence when I went in because I was young.
Yeah, and you know the statistics where it's black and brown women of color that are in prison. You know that, but then to see it with my own eyes, it was pretty surreal. So
yeah, it's so true, and it's still true today. But what's interesting is like when I went to Bedford today. So the woman that I went with, who's my friend's mother, so I call her mother, she said, oh, there's more white women in prison now than there was back then. And I was like, absolutely not. There's more white women in prison, but there are not more white women than there are black and brown women. First of all, the ratio is up to here for black women. They didn't get there yet. Like, they were here and we're here as far as prisons and jails. So they didn't get there within a couple of years.
And I see it all the time now. I essentially have a fellowship that I was awarded through Columbia University, which places me at Rikers Island every Saturday, where I teach photography, art workshops, pop culture and politics, like Kanye West and Donald Trump and kind of what's going on, as well as entrepreneurship in the digital age today. And I see them and they look like my cousin. They look like my neighbor, like the people that I grew up with on the block. Like it could have been me,
Wait, I have to say this. I just want you guys to know. So the Bronx is considered one of the highest $1 million blocks in the country. So the Bronx and Queens, actually Queens makes the Bronx, but the Bronx is so high, the ratio of the people from the Bronx who are in jail and in prison. But in Rikers Island right now are from the Bronx, from the 5 boroughs, but the Bronx rate's really high. Like Queens and the Bronx are like this any given day. That's who's in prison, so in jail. So you look at me, this is who's in jail. This is who's in prison. So when you hear our conversation and our talk about closing Rikers, we're saying it for a reason. They're targeting our neighborhoods. It's been targeted for years and it continues to be targeted. And they lock us up for any given thing. And I'm not saying that people don't do things that are wrong. That's true. It's absolutely true. But there's a way in which to treat people, and there's a way in which to do that. Incarceration has become the answer and the response to every single thing, but only in black and brown neighborhoods.
Yeah. So you have a daughter, and you were pregnant with your daughter before you went to prison.
I was pregnant at 15.
At 15, right. So what's your relationship with your daughter now? I just want to say that I don't know her. Her name is Adrian, right? You read about her in the book. I don't know her, but I feel like I do because my father was incarcerated. Just that little bit just gives me a lot of insight as to, who she is and her situation. So what was it like? What I don't know, because I still haven't been able to talk about this with my own father, is what was it like on your end as a parent, as an incarcerated parent with a child?
So it's difficult with my daughter. I was pregnant at 15, and I think if you remember what I said, that the older man that I ran away with became my worst nightmare. So I was 14 years old and he was 24, 23 years old. And she's a product of that. So my daughter is a product of rape. Just as harsh as it sounds, it's just what it is. And we've spoken about it, so that's why I talk about it in the book. But I love my daughter. But it's difficult. The relationship is difficult. It's difficult when you lock up a parent, especially the mother, It's difficult if you lock up the father, but it's definitely difficult when the mother is locked up and that bond between a child and a mother doesn't form, right? It doesn't exist. And so that's what's wrong with our relationship. So our relationship is a work in progress. I was just with her the other day, and I'll share this. I'm not going to give too much of the book away because I really want y'all to get the my book, please. But my daughter has become addicted to heroin. She has been addicted for a very long time to heroin. And so it's a very difficult situation. It's very delicate and it's very difficult. And I deal with it as best as I can. But I'm not gonna lie, just like I told her Monday, that I'm afraid to put any kind of money in her hands because I feel like I'm gonna get that phone call any given day and say, can you come identify? You know, and just being really honest. And so that makes the relationship difficult.
Yeah, I remember when I first met you, I kept thinking, just going down the list of things that we have in common, you know. So I, like Adrian, also didn't meet my mom till a later point in my life, and I was separated from her when I was 2, didn't meet her till I was 18, so that relationship never formed. And it takes some time, you know. I think as a daughter and as a mother with more or less that kind of like emptiness in that relationship, it takes a while and it never goes away. And I wish I had better advice.
But it's just a work in progress.
Yeah.
It's just one step at a time.
Yeah.
And it's not gonna come overnight.
Yeah, I think so. So as long as you're willing to dedicate the time now, I guess that we didn't have before, it should be able to, you know, start. So there's a part, I'm still on Adrian, if that's okay. There's a part in the book where, I'm not giving again too much away, but she comes to you and tells you that she has been raped as well by her father.
No, a friend of her father's.
A friend of her father's. And she says that you try to help her and
let me rephrase that. It was her uncle. It's not a friend.
So your mother came to visit you in prison, told you that she was raped by her uncle, and then told you that she wasn't going to press charges because she was scared that she wouldn't be believed. So there's this trend, right? Because you weren't believed at school when you went to your school counselor to tell you that this was happening at home. She felt like she wasn't going to be believed. You know, Dr. Christine Basley Ford wasn't believed or isn't believed, and even he wasn't believed. So there's this just
no evidence.
Yeah, right. And then Melania Trump, First Lady, is on this interview talking about we gotta have hard evidence if we're gonna accuse someone. So obviously the stuff, the system is a little
rigged.
Right. That's the word. But this trend just kind of keeps on happening. So.
I don't even know if like we can blame the system or any systems. It's us. Right? We fed into some narrative like that's just BS. Like 11 kids call it. Let's just call it BS. Because that's what it is. When I was a child and I just came to this country in the 70s, no one believed me, no one chose to believe me, but they know. Like right now, people are saying to me, oh Donna, we knew something was wrong, but we really didn't know what. Like, but those are the young ones. Those are the kids like I was. So I can't say anything about the kids. So now I'm hearing the parents of the kids saying, oh, well, we didn't really know how bad. And so what's wrong? Like, you know something's going on. You know something is wrong. You know a child is being hurt. You know something is wrong. So why don't we respond to that? Why do we think that it's okay not to speak out or even just pick up a phone and say, hey, there's a child being raped, there's a child being hurt, there's a child that's hungry, there's a child that just needs help. Why do we think like that's not okay to do? Why do we leave our children to fend for themselves just alone? It's wrong. And we do it all the time. And so we do it to adults because if we don't care about children, we're definitely not going to care about adults.
Despite your very violent, so you go into prison and you're sentenced to 25 years to life for something that you weren't directly involved with, but you take a responsibility for the way that you were involved in. So despite your very violent and lonely past in prison, you started to care for others. You had inmates and friends that suffered of HIV, AIDS, that were dying, a lot of older women, seniors that were sick. And you stood up for yourself when you were about to be sexually attacked by one of the CEOs. You know, you stood for yourself and you were helping these people out. Where did you find this like like, and this interest in
Yeah.
others?
So, I was an accessory, an unwilling accessory in a crime that was horrible. Right? I couldn't do anything, or felt like, and I couldn't do anything. So there's this interview in psychology today that's being used against me. There's parts of the interview that are true, and there's parts that are misquoted, because it was actually not me responding to the question. It was the director of the family violence program, the domestic violence, that came out of the governor's office, the woman that led that program, who was responding for me in certain spaces, right? Because I was still young and I was still not really sure what was going on and didn't understand the totality of the crime itself and my place in it. And so, she responded and said that they were going to kill Mr. V anyway, and they were going to kill Donna and the two other girls. Like, we were never going to live. That was something she was trying to drive home at that point, and so she was trying to drive it home with the reporter. And so the reporter wrote it in a way where it was like, I responded to it, absolutely not. Like, I was just finding this out myself, because the crime was something that was way over. I didn't know Mr. B, didn't know anything about it. But I say that to say that I met a lot of women just like that. Like a lot of, not all of them, but the vast majority of women that I met in Bedford Hills were there because they were unwilling accessories. And they were, they had suffered violence and abuse. And a lot of them didn't know. I mean, I remember some older women, like they were grandmothers, and they didn't know their sons had drugs in the basement. And they were selling drugs. They were like big time drug dealers. And the drugs were in the basement, and the money was in the basement. And so the grandmother or the mother is in prison doing time because it's her house or apartment. And this is what our prisons are filled with, right? Not everyone, but quite a bit. So I met a lot of women, young girls like myself, who had similar stories. And at the time that I went, just not too long after I went in the 80s, there was an epidemic that hit. And we didn't know what it was. We didn't know it was an epidemic. And women started dying. We would lock in our cells and we'd get out the next morning, and the woman that we probably played spades with the night before or ate with the dinner table didn't come out of her room, so we went looking for her and she was dead. And so I'm not a murderer, I'm not a killer, I'm not any of those things. And I started seeing that, and it started bothering me. And I vowed never to watch somebody die and not do anything. That's just not something I could do.
I remember the scene of the book because you went to her rescue, essentially. And
absolutely, I picked her up.
They were moving so slow, and they were wondering what to do, and kind of, the bystander effect.
Yeah. No, they were afraid. HIV and AIDS, like no one knew, so there was this stigma and this fear that, if you breathe next to someone, breathing the same air next to someone who was infected with the virus, that you were gonna die if you touched a cup or a towel or something. And I was like, I didn't care. Like this woman, Helen, who was my friend, was dying in the and I just knew, I didn't know it was wrong, but you could look at her and see. And I was like, so I was arguing with all, I cursed them out and everything. That was when I used to curse. Cussed them out. And it was like, picture, it was like, she's going to a hospital. And so it was things like that started happening, how we created the first HIV/AIDS program that addressed the epidemic in prison. We did that in Bedford Hills.
Yes. Your prison experience seems different than a lot of other people's prison experiences. You got your GED in prison.
No.
No.
Oh, yeah, I did.
Yeah, you did.
I didn't know. I had to think about it. I'm old. So no, I actually got it before. I got that. I had that. Yeah, because I had run away, so I didn't go get take the scholarship. So yeah, I had to.
Well, you
take the test.
found parental figures in prison, which you hadn't had before. You became an ordained minister in prison.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about that whenever.
Okay, well,
But yes, I'm an ordained minister and a chaplain. That's what they're two people who do that. And I'm not one of those ministers that like judge, or I'm like, I have work too. I'm not.
In chapter 10, you say, up to now, prison has been the first place in my life where I was safe from day-to-day abuse and protected by authority figures who cared. So would you say that prison was the best thing to ever happen to you?
So that goes back to the question I didn't answer. So that was the question you asked me about that officer that started he started being a stalker. And I'll say here because I didn't have to put it in the book, but it wasn't an officer, it was a sergeant. But I couldn't say that, so I had to do things to
How come you couldn't say that like in the book?
Yeah.
Are there rules around that?
Well, we wanted to just write, because it's right. The system, and then put people's names and stuff like that. So we did have to change some names and do some things legally and legally binding and stuff. So it was an official that was in charge of my daughter's case. My daughter was raped by her uncle. She had a severe venereal disease that left her sterile. And she had ran away at 14 like me, her mother. And she came to the prison. There was a phone call before she got there saying Adrian was missing. So I didn't know, I was panicking like what happened. She came to the prison the next day actually with a friend and with the mother of the friend and said, "You're the only one that will believe me," and told me she ran away because her uncle raped her, was raping her for months. And no one had taken her to the hospital, no one had done anything. And so the officials in the prison helped me with her. And they assigned a correctional staff person to be in charge of the case. And so that person just happened to be a very abusive person, a man. And he took advantage of that opportunity. And because I was very vulnerable in the moment, because your daughter, how do you picture your daughter going through what she went through? And the story she told me, and no one had taken her to the hospital. So I had to call, at that time it was BCW and officials, I had to call the state police, I had to do all these things, and they took her to the hospital. And so I found out she had a severe disease that, would possibly leave her sterile, and it seems like she is. And I had to deal with that. So I went back into being that 14-year-old that ran away, that 9-year-old that started being taken into a closet, and that 12-year-old that nobody believed when I went to school and told. And I owned all of that. And I was trying to handle it the best way I could. So this man was taking advantage of the situation. And then one day I was like, enough. It was just too much. I just couldn't do it. And so I stood up and I was like, this is it. This is never gonna happen again. And it just has absolutely never happened again. I dare someone to do that. I dare to do that. No.
I guess that's when it kind of took a turn in prison for you, and it just kind of became a beautiful experience with the women that you've met and that you were with on a daily basis. So after prison, you continued to work on domestic violence survivors justice Act Bill DVSJ, which has a strong perspective on incarcerated women. So it's women that get incarcerated get charged as, or women who murdered accidentally their partner through abuse or self-defense get judged just as someone who murdered someone just.
Yeah. So that bill came from the woman's Sister Mary, who was the first person, the leading person actually in this country to start talking about domestic violence of women. She created the first alternative to incarceration program in this country, was Green Hope Service, and it is Green Hope Services for Women, and then Steps to End Family Violence, and she created that conversation about domestic violence. And she was just like my role model and my mother. And so she was working on this subject and this issue from the 70s. And I met her in actually I met her earlier than what I said in the book, but I started there because that's when I really got to know her. So in 1988, 89, I met the nun who would become my mother. And we have the same heart, and I act like she's still here today because she is. the same heart, the same mind, the same energy, the same focus, the same goal, and which is to shed light about who we incarcerate and how this country incarcerates trauma, because the vast majority of women and girls that are incarcerated because of the violence and abuse that they've been subjected to in their lives.
Right.
A lot of the women are not guilty of doing anything. They are accessories. They are not guilty. And the ones that have killed because they were being severely abused did that in a moment where their minds just snapped, and it was fight or flight. And so they responded. And it doesn't make it right, but it makes it understandable.
Yeah, like Cynthia Brown.
Exactly.
Who's on trial for
Exactly.
self-defense.
We're trying to see, so she did get her sentence, reduced and all that. But that was a 14-year-old in Ohio that killed her father because he was severely beating her mother almost to death at this one point. But it was going on for so long, and it resonates so strongly because, it just resonates, right? And people are saying, oh, well, calling her all kinds of names. She should have known better. She was a child, and she felt like she had to protect her mother, herself, and her brother, because this was a man that was volatile, really, beyond volatile. So she snapped. She didn't know what else to do. But we don't look at the root causes of stuff. We just incarcerate to incarcerate. We don't look at why people have gone to prison or get to where they're at. We don't look at why people have all of a sudden have this mental illness, or even if we don't even look to see if it existed. I refer to this man who, I don't know if you guys heard in the news, but this black guy who always steals buses or trains because he likes them. Mm-hmm. And he's been doing this all his life, and he's like 40-something years old. You're just testing him to see if something's wrong, and you just happen to find out that he's autistic. And so he has this this little fascination with buses and trains and stuff. So he was stealing them. It's a crime, but he was doing it because he's autistic. But you never tested him for that. You never tested him for that until some people started saying, well, something's a little off here, like whatever. But you never paid any mind to that. So now you want to lock him away forever in a mental health facility because he's too dangerous because he'll steal buses and trains. Okay, fine, you recognize he has mental illness.
You mentioned a friend of yours that you saw on the subway here in New York one day that you were locked up with, and she was, strung out, dirty, just kind of, sleeping homeless, clearly.
She had no shoes on her feet. She had on these pants that were like leggings, but they would come up to here. She had on this tank shirt I see her right in my head with this spaghetti strap, and she was like just like this on the thing, and there was a bag next to her, and I saw a hospital band on her wrist. But at first I didn't know it was her. I was walking by